Shell Oil Company being sued by two Nigerian communities for allegedly failing to protect oil pipelines from being damaged and damaging the environment.
Millions of people on the continent lack access to clean water. But in Kenya, local women are stepping in to help people drink safely.
And Africa's emerging economies are getting positive media coverage, shining the spotlight on the continent's abundant natural resources, food, music and culture. Africa 54 starts right now. Hello and welcome. I'm Vincent McCory, Voice of America, coming to you from our global headquarters in Washington.
And I'm Cynthia Are, Channels Television here in Lagos, Nigeria. Stay with us for the next half hour as Vincent and I bring you news from around Nigeria, the continent and the world, only on Africa 54.
Well, first we must pass along the sad news. By now, you have probably heard that Nancy Reagan, the widow of U.S. President Ronald Reagan, died Sunday in Los Angeles at the age of 94. Mrs. Reagan's death was due to congestive heart failure. She met fellow actor Ronald Reagan in Hollywood and they married in 1952. Nancy Reagan was First Lady of California during her husband's 2 terms as governor from 1967 to 1975, and she was the U.S. First Lady from 1981 to 1989. President Reagan died in 2004 of Alzheimer's disease. Well, flags here in Washington flew at half-staff on Monday in memory of Mrs. Reagan.
Now, 2 Nigerian communities were given the go-ahead last week to pursue compensation claims against oil giant Shell through the British courts. They say leaks from pipelines have been ruining their environment in the Niger Delta for decades. Henry Ridgewell reports.
The Ogale people claim oil spills from Shell pipelines since 1989 have ruined their coastal fisheries and water supply. The nearby Bile community are also suing Shell for allegedly failing to protect the pipelines from damage caused by people trying to steal the oil, so-called bunkering. Martin Day, lawyer for the Ogale and Bile claimants, says it is Shell's responsibility to prevent the thefts.
In any other part of the world, there will be a heck of a lot more done by an oil company to try and prevent it happening. And when it does happen, to make sure, firstly, you know as soon as it's happened, so good early warning systems, and secondly, that you immediately close down the pipeline to make sure that any leakage is very, very minimal.
Shell declined an interview but issued a statement saying that the areas are heavily impacted by crude oil theft, pipeline sabotage and illegal refining, which remain the main sources of pollution. Shell also pointed out it has produced no oil or gas in Ogoniland, which includes the Ogale area, since 1993.
Shell's pipelines pass through both Ogale and Bile, and it has been leaks from those pipes that have caused the damage. So the fact that Shell no longer actually extracting oil from the ground under those areas is really neither here nor there. In the end, it is their oil that has caused the damage.
Last year, British courts ruled Shell had to pay $77 million in compensation to the Bodo community in the Delta, whose land had also been hit by oil spills.
No question, but Shell don't want a repeat of that, so that's what they've been objecting to the case being heard in the UK. So we're very pleased that the judge has agreed to let us crack on with the case here.
Shell says it has already agreed to an 18-month clean-up plan with local communities and the United Nations and is expected to argue that the cases should be heard in Nigeria. A date for the next hearing in London is yet to be decided. Henry Ridgewell for VOA News, London.
Well, no jury is necessary for our next story about the need for more clean water. In Kenya alone, 16 million people lack access to it, and 60% of rural Africans are off the water grid. Lenny Ruvaga reports from Kenya's Kajiado province on an initiative enlisting local women to try to fill the gap.
Kajiado gets little rainfall. The Kenyan capital, Nairobi, is 125 miles away from Esther Kuma's homestead. The mother of 9 has to buy 10 jerry cans of water a day from local businessmen. Even then, she says, the water isn't always safe to drink.
Maji ni shida. Kilomita 10 tunaenda maji. We have to go as far as 10 kilometers to reach water since there are no rivers around. That's why we're forced to buy water. When we hear of anyone selling water, we have no choice but to buy.
Africa Aqua, in partnership with Coca-Cola and Water.org, have been setting up these eco centers around East Africa since 2014 to provide safe drinking water. The centers get water through boreholes. They use solar power and a purification technology called reverse osmosis. Cabinet Secretary for Water and Irrigation, Eugene Wamalwa, says misappropriation of funds in his ministry has kept so many rural Kenyans off the state water grid.
I've told them in no uncertain terms there will be no sacred cows, and coming into a ministry that was one of those affected by the cleanup that His Excellency the President led, we have said we are not going to go back to the ways of the past, the ways of corruption.
The county digs public boreholes, but residents must still trek many kilometers to reach them. This newly opened eco center has 15 employees who will deliver safe water by improvised motorbikes known as tuk-tuks. The 20-liter cans sell for 50 cents.
The charge of the costs to the customer is actually not very high, because what we do, they can pay these into installments. We don't tell them that you have to do it that particular day. You can do it in installments until the other time you're refilling.
This new eco center hopes to serve around 3,000 residents, and plans are underway to replicate the initiative in other areas. Lenny Ruvaga for VOA News, Oloitoktok, Kenya.
Women are also making a difference in Liberia as the country enters its Ebola recovery phase. Millions of people are still suffering, but a training center is empowering women by teaching them how to design and sew. We get that story from Jackson Mvunganyi of the VOA.
Reports show that across Africa, unemployment affects women and girls the hardest. In some post-conflict countries like Liberia, the economy and high levels of gender discrimination make it hard for women to find meaningful employment to support their families. Other reports show that women are often victims of intergenerational poverty, a cycle that is compounded by high rates of illiteracy. Many who lack the skills and resources have resorted to selling crafts and food on the streets. It is this entrepreneurial spirit that inspired Alfreda Mason, a social entrepreneur and designer, to create Jola House. It's a training program that helps women in Liberia gain skills to become entrepreneurs and to drive economic development in their communities.
Well, my inspiration was very simple. I left here during the coup in my late teens, and I lived in the U.S. for many years, where I have my family, my husband, and my kids. And we brought our kids home for a visit. And I just decided there was just so much devastation and so much to do. I decided that I was going to come back after my son went to school and see what I can do to help my country.
The students at Jola House are given extensive training and work opportunities to design and create items that are both functional and decorative. Most of their clothing and accessories are sold in the U.S. market.
I usually reach out to girls between 17 and 25. Most of them are mothers, single mothers. Most of them are either high school dropout or they are in high school but in low grades. So right here we have one of the students putting patches together.
Mason says that the Jola House program gives the young women options to either work independently as designers or work together in a cooperative.
And for the first 2 years, our focus was on training and development. And after we train, we're trying to just not train and let these women go back to their homes, but wanted to train and develop some kind of enterprising. We provide the material, and then you can produce the product, and we buy the product back from you. And then that price we pay is like a living wage. Or you can go ahead and form a business. So we kind of recommend our girls to microcredit and help them with their help them with filling up the forms, help them to have some kind of guarantee fund that when they go out there to get on their own, they will have some kind of startup funds.
Liberia's civil war ended in 2003. Its post-conflict phase was disrupted by an Ebola epidemic that killed thousands of its people. Mrs. Mason says that women are often affected at disproportionate rates, and that's why she started Jola House as a way to reduce the economic inequality of women. Alice Clemens is the administrator at Jola House. She was part of the second class to graduate from the program.
Before I started working with Jola House, I had a lot of challenges. I would face a lot of difficulties, but when I met Mrs. Mason and we talked, she told me about Jola House. I had interest in Jola House when I came and got employed. I started work, and I'm so grateful to God that things are okay.
The market for Jola House products was greatly affected by the recent Ebola epidemic. The majority of her clientele were tourists and expats. They don't come as much anymore. But she hopes that with more of her products reaching the U.S. market, Jola House can increase their revenue and continue to help more women. For Voice of America, I'm Jackson Bunganyi.
Now, we told you earlier about some women in Kenya who are helping get clean water to people who need it. Here in the U.S., an ongoing water crisis in Flint, Michigan, has seen thousands of volunteers from around the country descend on the central Michigan town to help. VOA's Ken Farabal reports.
And we're going to need 1 case of water for the house.
Virginia Bielasko's home in Byron, Illinois is about 7 hours away from this residential neighborhood in Flint, Michigan. But the lack of safe drinking water here is a problem that hits close to home, no matter where you live.
We'll give them 3 cases of water.
It's a basic human need. We can't survive without water.
Which is why, for several weeks now, Bielasko has joined an army of volunteers that have descended on Flint to serve one basic mission: get safe, clean water to those who need it, which is just about everybody who lives here.
We've mobilized over 2,000 volunteers in response to the critical need that exists here in Flint.
Keith Alvey is the American Red Cross Division Disaster Executive managing the agency's relief efforts in Flint, where the crisis isn't the usual situation the Red Cross responds to.
It's just the water supply, so it's not like we face with a tornado where you can see where the damage is, or a hurricane where the winds have taken out multiple parts of the infrastructure. It's all concentrated in the water.
Water that now comes in bottles instead of flowing from taps or shower heads.
Red Cross!
The Red Cross, which is working with several different agencies in Flint to provide relief, says the biggest need is not more bottled water.
So there's a lot of need for people to go to all these different centers and help distribute the water.
They're absolutely essential. It's one thing to have a warehouse full of water. It's quite another to get it into the hands of the people who actually need it.
People that volunteer Virginia Bielasko meets on her daily trek through Flint's neighborhoods.
The most eye-opening experience for me is just to think that we're here in the United States, and here we have a city where the people can not just turn on their tap and have reliable water.
Circumstances Terrence Johnson has been dealing with since December, and while he is thankful for the volunteers, he is growing weary of the wait for long-term fixes.
Passing out water isn't going to solve this problem. Fixing the pipelines will solve the problem.
A goal that right now doesn't have an end date or a clear price tag. Kane Fairbaugh, VOA News, Flint, Michigan.
Well, we want to know what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we covered. Join the conversation on Facebook. The address is Africa 54, and check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Coming up, the value of the Naira rebounds, but Nigerians are protesting some of the consumer charges they're being asked to pay to their banks. This and more coming up.